Welcome to the Write the Damn Book Already podcast. My name is Elizabeth Lyons. I'm a 6-time author and book editor, and I help people write and publish powerful, thought-provoking, wildly entertaining books without any more overthinking, second-guessing, or overwhelm than absolutely necessary. Because let's face it, some overthinking, second-guessing, and overwhelm is going to come with the territory if you're anything like me. I believe that story and shared perspective are two of the most potent ways we connect with one another, and that your story, perspective, and insights are destined to become someone else's favorite resource or pastime. For more book writing and publishing tips and solutions, and plenty of free and low-cost resources, visit publishaprofitablebook.com. And for recommendations of fabulous books you've possibly never heard of, book writing inspiration, and the occasional meme so relatable you'll wonder if it was created with you in mind, follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth Lyons Author. If I shared all the outtakes from this episode with you, we'd be here for days. But I kind of wish I could, because truly, it's sometimes not the best part of the interview, but it's a really, really close second. Oh my heavens. All right. Welcome to this next episode of Write the Damn Book Already. I went down the rabbit hole in this one maybe a week and a half ago now. I made a reel. I had started reading Garvin's latest book. There's no coming back from this. And I quickly realized there was no coming back from that because I had the thought, I cannot write a book, or I cannot write a novel. This woman is just too good. I can't do this. So I made a reel about it and I tagged her, and she was so gracious as to respond. And then I, of course, jumped right on that opportunity and said, will you please come on this podcast and talk about your writing process, your experience? And she agreed. And I've been skipping around my house ever since. I swear, it's like she's like the friend I didn't know I have to have. And she lives all the way in New York. And I don't know. I have never wanted to live in New York City, but lately I feel like there are too many people who I'm starting to completely love who live in New York City. And maybe it's time for not a move, but maybe just a trip. I promise, if you are an aspiring author, if you have written one book or two books and you're working on the next book, this episode is for you. Take all your preconceived notions and your assumptions about what it's like to be a full-time writer and just set them to the side. And then come back with curiosity to hear Anne's perspective on this whole glorious, insane adventure. When you write your first book at 48 or 49 years old, and it today has 102 reviews on Amazon, and then you release your fifth book, and it, as of right now, it's been out, a few months, and it has over 15,000 reviews. And the book just prior, titled I Thought You Said This Would Work, has 21,000 reviews. You start to make some assumptions. You make some good assumptions. You make some scary assumptions. And I loved that I was able to voice all of mine to Anne, and she was able to correct me. I also sort of almost wish that this had been a video interview, because the number of technological and other challenges that we experienced during this, with phones ringing and iPads ringing and not knowing how to turn anything off, it was just really validating. Let's just say it was very validating to know that I am not the only person in the world who can't figure out why the update on my Apple Watch makes it impossible for me to turn the ringer off, because I do not know where that function has gone. As per usual, I have linked all of Anne's everything in the show notes so that you can follow her, you can go grab all of her books, and you can go down the rabbit hole just as I did into what an absolutely incredible, delightful woman she is. And now I'm just going to turn you over to the interview, because I'm already in chapter 2 of I Thought You Said This Would Work, and I really need to know what happens. So here's Anne. So here's what has happened.
Okay.
I saw a post a while ago when I have I've done such a deep dive, and I don't normally do this, but I started down the rabbit hole and then I couldn't stop. I was like, what is happening? Okay. So when There's No Coming Back from this came out, Of course, it was everywhere, right? Or everywhere I am, like everywhere I'm looking. I was like, I've got to get my hands on that. And then life happened as it does. And I kind of kept forgetting or whatever. And then, I don't know, a week ago, maybe somebody posted, I said, it's happening now. It's happening now.
Yeah.
So I got it. And then I made the reel about how mad I was at you,
I know,
it was so good.
Reel was so amazing.
Well, it was just, I was like, I love her. I hate her. I don't know how to feel about any of this. And then the best part was your response to the reel, because you were like, I have to take 7 medications in order to focus. I'm like, now I love this woman even more. So, okay, let's start at the top. Let's just talk, if we may. Well, I'm going to define what the top is, but there's no coming back from this. Here's my huge realization about fiction writing as I'm reading this. I'm a big nonfiction reader and memoir reader. And in the last, I'd say 18 to 24 months, I've gotten back into fiction. Sure. It's like a whole new thing. Okay. Yeah. So I normally don't read books on ebook. I'm not opposed to ebook. I just I like the feel of my books, whatever. I also cannot read it on anything smaller than an iPad because I'm 107 years old. And even with magnified readers and a magnifying glass, I can't see anything. But I downloaded There's No Coming Back from This onto the ebook because, as I mentioned, I had to have it immediately. Patience is not my friend. And here's what I noticed while reading it. You know how in an ebook, they underline the most highlighted pieces of a book?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you don't get that in a physical book. You don't know what people are highlighting.
That's true.
I had this moment. I was like, oh my God, this is great. I understand why people highlight things in nonfiction because they want to remember, go do step 1, get out of bed. Right.
Exactly.
But here's this thing, and I'm not going to spoil anything. I just have this open right here in There's No Coming Back from This. There's this line, whatever all else comes and goes, memories, parents, houses, children, the truth I'm left with is this: I am mine. What if that was enough? And it's one of the most highlighted passages.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Because I try not to look too much at stuff because readers can be so mean. And then so the minute you start looking, then you start going, oh, maybe I should look over there. And then somebody writes, and Garvin, trash. And then you're like, oh. So I try not to look too much at it because I'm trying to protect, because I'm always writing another book. And so if I'm always writing another book and somebody calls me trash, then it's throws me off a little bit.
But that is so remarkable to me because this was your 5th book, right? 5, number 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's something in my deep dive that I discovered. Your first book, which was On Maggie's Watch, right? In 2010.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That has 102 reviews right now on Amazon.
Yeah.
I know, to some degree, how many reviews There's No Coming Back from This has, right?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot more.
Yeah. It's just for the listeners, it's 22,000.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot.
It's a lot. So my first question is, do you read them?
I thought you said this would work. I thought you said this would work as 22,000 and There's No Coming Back from This has 14 now, but it's only been out
I may have reversed them. You're right. You're absolutely right. I thought you said this was work has 22 and There's No Coming Back from This has 15. Are we really going to fight over this?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But so my one question I had for you was, do you read them? And I think I'm gleaning the answer. But the second question I have is it's not it's just, here it is. How do you still have any level of imposter syndrome or fear or doubt or anything when you have 22, right? Because that's what everyone would assume is, oh, she's good now.
Yeah, you would think so. Peter, come here. Sorry. I think you have a note in your thing that says, put your pet someplace quiet.
Well, here's the thing. I don't. And the reason I don't is because it would be so hypocritical because my dog barks at the mere thought that the wind might blow.
Yep. I know Peanut is very upset with other dogs. Come here. Yeah. And the dog just walked by. But
it's okay.
So you know what? So here's the thing. I do kind of think it's the same as, you know how they say you're only as good as your last book, or you're only as good as your last thing. Well,
as they say.
I mean, I think sometimes that's what I worry about. Like, it's very possible that I'll not write a good book, and I don't want to get lazy, and I want to make sure that I'm not repeating myself, or, you know, like whatever. And so I know that I do have to say to myself, and like when I'm like right now, I'm going through edits for the book that's going to come out this summer, and I have to say, I literally have to pull a tarot card, which is new for me because I just bought them at TJ Maxx because that's the center of all psychic healing. I
don't know what is better for me in this moment. The fact that you've just admitted that you just bought a thing of tarot cards, or that you got them at TJ Maxx.
Yeah, I know, because they are the spiritual mystery spot. They're the
okay. So what did it say? No, it's the vortex in there. If I have goods, we're done. Okay. Yeah. So what did it say?
Well, it said, you know, be confident. You know that what you're doing, you've done it, and you know it, and keep going. And it was helpful because when I'm writing when my editor, you know, generally reads it, and then I get a developmental editor that works with me on the book, right? And so when they're doing it, if they aren't steering me, if they don't really get exactly what I'm doing, then their comments will be pushing me in another direction. And I'll be like, so did I do it wrong? Should I be doing that? Like, what's happening? And then I have to be like, be confident, you know what you're doing. And then I like send a note to my friend, and I'd be like, do you think I should take this word out? Because I use like a lot. And she'd be like, Anne, be confident. So I don't know. I mean, I maybe other writers aren't like that, but
I think everyone's like that. I think, well, I don't want to say everyone. I won't put everyone in the same bucket, but I think the vast majority are. We just all think we're the only one.
Yeah, for sure. And I am so willing to talk about it because I think that if people understand that it's hard, right? And each sentence is hard and it never gets any easier, then the people that are sort of wading into writing a book won't feel so bad about themselves when they don't get it exactly right the first time, right? And because so whenever I remember I read this, you know, The Handmaid's Tale, the second one that came out, the sequel, you know, the one with the green cover. She wrote like a sequel of it. And I read it and I thought, my God, it feels like she just wrote this in an afternoon. But in the back of it, when you read the acknowledgments, she's like, oh my God, thank God for my editor who pointed this and this and this out, because I would never have done it before her. And I thought, see, everybody needs this a little bit, you know? But I will say, I love editing. I do love editing. I don't love the deciphering of like, have I done it right? Did I do it that way? Keep going. What am I doing? You know, that indecision space it's just part of the art, but it's stressful.
So how do you navigate it? Because, for example, like trying to come full circle for 1 second with the original thing about people highlighting a passage in fiction, I suddenly had this moment where I realized, okay, they're not highlighting it because it's a to-do or they want to remember. They're highlighting it because it resonated.
Yeah.
Like it's something that you said, that a character said, that a feeling, the way you expressed a feeling of a character, not even of yourself necessarily, that the reader resonates with. So God forbid that had gotten edited out. I mean, I'm sure there were things, by the way, and there are things that get edited out that would have resonated with someone. But how has your process evolved now 5-6 books in, where you can decide, do I further explain this to my editor, or do I just say, oh, they must know what they're talking about, I'll take their notes and run with it?
Yeah, you know, that's like the question. It's such a good question. It's a perfect question. And I think what happens for me is I have to sort of go into myself and go, okay, what are you trying to say? What's this arc? What is it exactly? Do you need more here? Will it pull people out of the story? Does it not allow the reader enough agency to put their own stuff in there? I have to sort out my experience of being a reader, being a writer, and being a human to get it right. And one of the things that I do is I write, usually my editor is telling me to give them more rather than take stuff out. They're always saying, let us in here, And I'm always fighting against that because I'm always like, is it too much? Am I explaining her emotion? Do I need to put it here? Did her actions show it enough? And sometimes the answer is, yeah, I think it's fine. And other times I'm like, all right, and I try to figure it out.
So do you get the ability to say, no, I think it's fine? And your editor will say, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I do. I do. Yeah. Now sometimes I'll be like, okay, I'll say to my editor who I really respect and admire. I'll say to her, no, you're pushing me in the wrong direction. That's not the direction I want to go. Okay. I'll be like, this is the direction I want to go. You need to help say this story because I must not be getting it right. And it sometimes, like with the last book, it took her a few times to finally go, oh, got it. And then because I think some people, and I think a lot of times people that are editing quickly, right? They're used to reading a lot of stories, and I try really hard to find something universal, but then dig into something that is a little different than that. I did not want, in the last book, I did not want her to be, it was very important to me that she was not ruined by mother leaving, and that in fact that is great, and that is a higher apple on the tree, right? So the lowest fruit is make her miserable because her mother. What about her mother? What about her mother? And I was like, no, see, it was her father. That is the thing that gets missed. This other thing, and I've got something going on in the writing right now that is a little bit more subtle than I think is the lowest hanging fruit on it. And so through her edits, I'm trying to see where I miss that. So it's almost like reading the edits for what she missed so that I could get it right so that she gets it and we can both be like, oh, I see.
Well, that was my question. You actually gave me a question, which I don't know the answer to maybe it's different in different cases, but so your editor, you were with Lake Union for the last 2 books. Are you with Lake Union again for this current one?
Yeah.
And
I love that
editor.
Same editor. Yeah. Okay. Same developmental editor too.
That's amazing. Okay. Yeah, so is that developmental editor, I'm assuming for whatever reason, it's a she. Am I correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, is she working on multiple books at the same time?
Oh, I'm sure she is. Or I think she's on an incredibly tight schedule.
Yeah.
So I think she has to shoot from the hip fast. And I think she does a really good job for that. But since I'm so immersed in it, I'll be like, it's hard. It's really hard. Like I have to be like, okay, calm down. It's fine. She's giving you great advice. Just settle down,
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating to me because I typically can as an editor, I can edit 1 nonfiction and 1 memoir at a time, but I could do 2 nonfictions at a time. I don't think I could do 2 fictions at a time.
Well, here's what I think she does. I think she's probably doing a relay. Like when I have my edits, she's probably working on another one.
Yes.
And then, right. So she's probably going like this, which must be incredibly difficult to do.
I mean, I really have to give her so much credit because I even struggled to read, I finished, there's no coming back with this. And then as Kindle does at the end, they're like, oh, do you want to read, I thought you said this would work. I have to have everything written down because it's.
Yeah. No, me too.
I thought this would. Right. I thought you said this would work. And I was like, well, of course I want that. So then I start reading that. And I'm also reading the arc for my friend Neely Alexander's next book, which is coming out in, I don't know, a few months. And I'm conflating all the stories.
Yeah. No, I know. I know exactly what you mean. And then I think what's hard about this too is that you add a layer of comic timing that's really important. And so if she asks for something, I have to not only decide whether I need to give it here or not. Does it screw with the flow of the story? Does it screw with the comedy? Does it? And I have to really be careful with that because comedy is as much about timing. Like I'm not writing bump jokes. I'm just, it's a little bit it's actually super subtle. Like whenever anybody says that's hilarious, I'm like, is it though? Like hilarious? It's like, yeah.
I think that makes it more hilarious. I think that's why it's hilarious because it's so subtle. Yeah. Like, with comedians, supposedly the deal is they're saying the thing that everyone's thinking, but is too afraid to say. I think it's similar to that, where in my experience so far with your books, you're like, I'm in the character's head. Yeah. And then I'm thinking what she would be, and then you say it. And so it's hilarious because it's like, oh, perfect.
Right. You're like, oh, yeah. And so I think sometimes when I'm doing the edits, I have to be very careful to not, push into the poignancy and leave the comedy behind or one or the other. And often when she asks me to do something, I'll be like, that's a funny thing. We can go past that. Like that's that's just a funny thing. And so that piece of it is a little bit more difficult, I think, sometimes for me to to make sure that I don't screw up the timing. And I didn't mean to interrupt. There's like a small delay. So it sounds for everyone who's like, stop cutting Anne off. I'm not attempting to. No, I didn't even know that's
happening.
Totally fine.
I want to talk about two things, if you're amenable. The first one is, can we talk about the fact that you have a PhD? You're a scientist.
Yeah.
How, Anne? How did it go from that to this?
I probably shouldn't have been a scientist. Let's say that. Because when I went to college, I became a nurse. That was my degree. Mm-hmm. And then no one ever said, oh, you should write a book. Like I'd never tried writing before. I was a reader, but it wasn't ever like my parents weren't writers. I didn't have an easy segue into it. Never occurred to me. I didn't know anything about it. And so I knew that I wanted to do something other than be a nurse my whole life because I wasn't a very good nurse. You have to give people the right meds every time.
But I bet you were funny.
I was funny and nice.
Yeah.
But not always right on schedule, which is not great. Yeah. People bleed out. It's annoying. So I had to. So I got into a science track, and in some ways, science is storytelling in some ways, but also what I really loved while I started graduate school, because they put me into teaching right away, was teaching, because teaching is storytelling.
Sure.
So I got to be a teacher for years at the college level. I loved it. My professor, though, my mentor, used to say to me on a regular basis, "You're the worst writer I've ever met." And he'd do it meanly. Like he's always mad at me about it. And I'd be like, I mean, how can I be so bad? But science is, you say the same sentence over and over and over, right?
Right.
And so I would fuck around with that. Like I'd be, oops, sorry. Like,
no, it's favorite word. Use it up.
Yeah, I'd change the words, all right? And he'd be like, "We don't care about that. Stop changing. It's the same sentence." And so it was no fun for me to write. So then since I was a writer, when I had read Lori Moore's Like Life and some of her short story things. And then I read a couple of early Elizabeth Berg books. And I just was so moved by both of their humor and poignancy that I thought, oh, this sounds like something that I could do maybe, but I still didn't try. And then I got tenure and the weight of research let up a little bit. And so there was a contest in town and I entered it. And then, and what's interesting about that is that Christy Clancy, who is the author of Second Home, which is going to be a movie with the guy, Jeremy Lannister from Game of Thrones. And she wrote second home and shoulder season, and she does not live that far from me. And we both won first and second place.
Oh my gosh.
And that's how I know her. In fact, that's how we sort of became friends. But it was such a like aha moment in so many ways. Not only was it an aha moment like, oh, maybe I could do something like this. In fact, I often say that it was probably one of the happiest moments in my life, short of having a baby, but having a baby hurts. And this did not. So I was so excited, and then the other piece of it was it unlocked how an idea for a story, because what they did is they gave us a piece of art and we had to write a story about it in 24 hours. You had to write it in
that was the contest?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I looked at the picture and I thought, oh, this is what writing is. You put a picture in your head and you write a story about who's in it. And that unlocked everything for me.
Really?
And then I couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop.
Is that still your process today?
I think, yeah, I think it is. Because I'm a very visual learner. And so I'm sure it is my process still. It is. I think really hard and I see the scenes. Yeah.
So do you see a scene, or do you see a scene first? And this might change, or do you get an idea like for almost a trope or a plot line or something you want to explore? Like, for example, what if it's the father who leaves and not the mother who leaves? Or what if they're upset about the father and not the mother? What do you play with first?
So it's a little different every time. Like, for example, that one, I had written a book that wasn't working. It did not work. In fact, I was in the last edits of it with my publisher, and I was really struggling. It was during COVID. My ex-husband, who I'm very close to, was in the hospital for 45 days with sepsis. Like, my kids everybody, it was a wreck, and I couldn't get that book to work. And I'm
pretty close to my ex-husband too. So I'm glad we have that in common, because everyone always looks at me cross-eyed when I say that.
And everybody thinks you should get back together,
Yes.
And I'm just like, I'm like, he's great. I like it that he lives over there.
And I like that he's over there.
Yeah, it's just kind of nice. So I took a joke, one line out of that book, one joke, and I made a story about it. I said in the book, something like she made her money from being a costumer for all of the Nora Ephron movies made into dogs, right? And then I thought, okay, I remember thinking to myself, okay, who would that be the worst possible job for? And then I built the character out of that. Now, that doesn't, like, sometimes it doesn't always do that way. Like in the dog year, I watched a woman shoplift at TJ Maxx again. Yep. And she looked so ungodly miserable, but she was also very well dressed, and I could not stop thinking about her. So I wrote a story about that. So usually it's a joke I make, and then I jot it down and I look at it and I think that would be funny.
So is that kind of common for you to start? Like, you get an idea and then you'll write a little story and then you just keep building it?
Here's what I do. I just sort of noodle around with an idea. Like I think about something kind of funny, and if it sticks with me, then I think I might want to write a book about this. And then what I do is I drill down why I think that's funny and why I might want to write a book about it. Like, I get down to the seed of why it's funny, and usually it's painful. And so I think really hard about why I think that's painful. And then which usually has to do with somebody's core wound, probably mine.
Sure.
And then I'll start to think about it. And I think, who would really hate this situation? And then I start to build out a full character. And I ask myself a bunch of questions to sort of build it out so that I know exactly what point I'm trying to make. And usually that point comes from, something that I thought was funny in the original thing. Like the book that I'm writing right now, it's about a poor man, Tony Robbins, who takes over a kids' theater camp and makes it into a camp for anxious and depressed adults. But he's really bad at everything. And so he doesn't have enough money to pay for actual professionals. So he staffs it with anxious and depressed college students. And it's called Bummer Camp. And was so fascinated in this idea because here's what I was thinking. First, I thought, well, I don't know who it was I was thinking about at the time. Could have been my husband, could have been my brother, who is kind of a little odd little bird. But I was thinking, wouldn't it be great for people to be able to go to life rehab like they do for addiction rehab? Like, how great would it be that you could be like, I'm going to take 22 days and go live someplace and figure my shit out, right? Like,
right.
And so then I thought, it would be so great if it was at a camp, because I was a camp nurse once, a long time ago.
Oh my Lord.
And then I was like, but like
where everybody's trying to figure their shit out? Is that what
I thought? Well, then I thought, what if and then I said, but camps are staffed with high school, college kids all the time. And I went like, oh my God, that would be so funny. And then it was easy. Like I was like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to write about. And the protagonist isn't that man. The protagonist is the woman who grew up at that camp and was, and she got her childhood sort of stolen from that camp because she was the oldest, most responsible kid. And so she's had to distance herself from this sort of sinkhole of a camp that was this theater kids camp. And she gets hauled back in because of shenanigans. And so, yeah. So, and I want to explore the idea of, well, a couple of things, the hyper responsibility that goes on when we ask people for help. And then the opposite side of that is when the person that was asked to help doesn't help, the guilt that they feel like from not, satisfying what everybody expected them to do. There's that piece. And then there's this piece about that I just wanted to look at it like, wouldn't it be great for all of us to have a place to go where we could feel less anxious and depressed? Like, what do we do with those people? And what if that's everybody? So I know, like, so this book is going to be, it's probably my most wild book, but also the one that I was able to lean into the most of my sort of quirky way of writing,
So do you assess pretty early on, like what's the internal conflict? What's the external conflict? What's the goal? All those sorts of things. Okay.
Yeah. Because if I know exactly that,
then
I can have a lot of fun with it. But if I'm trying to figure that out as I'm writing, it'll be like a big lumpy potato. Like I'll just run with every funny thing that I think is funny.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there won't be a story. Everybody will be like, well, this was fun, but I don't know what happened.
Where are we going?
Yeah,
where are we going? Right.
Yeah.
So how fast then, once you have that idea, how quickly can you draft one, if we're going to call it? Like, are you a person who whips out the first draft and then goes in and adds more and more layers? Or do you do it all slowly and methodically? What's your approach?
I write like a person paints a wall. Like I start it and then I go over it again and I go over it and over it and over it and all the way down to the end. And then I go over it again. So yeah, I layer.
Okay.
And change. So as I learn the characters and as they, change with everything that's happening, I have to go back up and change the first chapter and over and over and over. So yeah. And in fact, towards the end, like when I'm really getting down to hand in that first draft, I go from the last 3 chapters up to the first 3 chapters, like over and over again to get it right.
Right.
So, yeah. So
I'm obsessed with the first sentence of the first chapter and the last sentence of the last chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the piece that people either hooks them and keeps them, right?
Right.
Yeah. Makes them think about it afterwards.
Like you put the book down and you're just like, your jaw is just on the ground. Like,
yeah.
What?
Yeah.
just happened. Okay. You tall poppy writers.
Yeah.
So I went down that rabbit hole too. And here's the craziest thing. Amy Impellizzeri. Am I saying her last name?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know Amy and I have to reach out to her because I don't remember how I know her. But I've
Oh,
known her, like we've been connected for at least a decade. And I
wow.
can't remember now. But then that was such a weird, and I don't believe in coincidence. I'll have to go get a tarot deck from TJ Maxx and find
You
out
did.
like what this means.
Yeah.
But how did Tall Poppy come to be? And I'm curious about if you're, as much as you're willing to share your journey from being a nurse to being a full-time writer and doing the poppy writer, the Tall Poppy writer thing, because so often people are, I think, a little confused because they're being sold some stuff that's not true about, you write a book and you make $1 million in 5 minutes and you can quit your job and you can make this your full-time living. And they think they're doing something wrong, but they also very much would love to make a reasonable or more than reasonable living writing. What was that transition like for you? And how did you ensure that when you were doing the very first book, I'm assuming that wasn't like a runaway, I'm now a multi-gazillionaire.
Oh, I didn't make any money in that book. I still don't make any money on that book.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think anybody reads that book. Even though, and that book got it sort of edited to its last breath, which was kind of a bummer for me, but it was my first book and I couldn't do anything about it. But
sure.
Well, it's been a slog. I mean, it's been tough. I think probably I felt that way. Like I remember when the book came out, it was the day of my divorce and I had pneumonia.
Oh,
And
the first book?
Yeah, the first book. And that was, in 2010. So I probably joined Twitter in 2009. Social media wasn't what it is or was, right? So and it's the same. It was the same thing then it is now, that publishing houses don't do a great job with, pushing your stuff out. And so I thought, after I Like You Just Fine When You're Not Around, I could see that even though I made a list with that book, I could see my career going into the toilet. And I was because I didn't have enough sales. My publisher wasn't interested in my next book. I was
Even though you made a list.
Even though I made a list, yeah.
Was that USA Today? Was that when?
Yeah, it was USA Today. And I don't know. I could see the writing on the wall. I was like, this is not going to be good for me. And so even though that publisher was Tyrus Books at the time, and then Simon & Schuster bought the book, and they did a great job for me. Like they were amazing, but you can only do so much, right? So when I created the Tall Poppies, and I think I did that just before the dog year, my thought was, this is the only way that I'm going to live. Like this, this is the only way that I'm going to survive as an author. If I create this and everybody joins in and sends everything out. Right. And that's probably true, but it probably did save my career, but not probably in the way that you'd think, because I always say this, nothing moves the needle and everything moves the needle. So what that means is, if I can't move the needle with, 50 women shouting out on my launch day, nobody can. However, I do know that is also bringing in small numbers of people all the time. So over the course of a career, it's terrific. The other thing is the Tall Poppies, what it did is that I would say, except for the romance people, who were always a big group of people who supported each other and, talked about things, we were the first group that sort of decided that generosity was the way we were going to go. And we got diverse titles, diverse authors. Like we were the first group that did that. And then COVID hit, and then there was everybody else, right?
Right.
And then social media was also changing during that time. But because we were the first, I had a lot of sort of name recognition in New York, because the agents knew who I was and the publishers had a sense. But the publishers were still like, we don't give a shit because she still doesn't have the numbers. At least but the agents, did care. And who cared was Lake Union. Because I saw them sort of cherry picking some of the poppies. And then they signed up for my newsletter, so that and I got rid of one agent, got a new agent, because he said, if I'm going to take you on, you should be a tall poppy. And I was like, that's me. So I am the Tall Poppy. And he was like, oh, so
Oh, he didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Didn't
interesting.
even know, but it made a big difference. So then,
Okay.
so I said to that agent, then don't pitch me to anyone but Amazon to Lake Union. I only want to go to Lake Union. And because I knew that they had the reach and the distribution, and I knew that they treated their authors really well.
Even more so than the big five.
The big five, here's the thing. They do their best. They don't have unlimited money, and they give the money to the people with the largest advances. Also, they have distribution through bookstores, and the media outlets are so few and far between now that only the big names get that.
Right.
And the big names get, chosen from above, and the rest of us are just like spaghetti, right? But they probably know, they probably look at the bottom line now. This is where I'm making it up, but I'm pretty sure this is true. They take a debut and they say debut, and that in and of itself sparks interest. And they probably do the math. If we have a person with their third book and then we have a debut, the third book doesn't make as much as the debut. Get rid of her, get another debut.
That's fascinating.
Now, again,
is it your experience and understanding that kind of some of these, what I call smaller boutiques, right? So there's Lake Union, which is an Amazon imprint. There's Zibby Books. There's Rise Writers. There are all these kind of smaller boutiques. There's a greater partnership.
There is. Yeah. And I think, yes, I do. I love that. I really hope we continue to see those places flourish. I think the problem is, it's a problem of discovery for authors, of course. Yes. And it's a problem of, what's the word I want to say? It's a problem of demand. And so like the Britney Spears book has such high demand. So everybody's like, yeah, but like there's very little demand for a new author and now there's a little more demand for Anne Garvin books. But right, if I hadn't had Lake Union and their distribution and their huge commitment to me, it wouldn't have happened for me either. And so
what makes their distribution different from the big five?
Well, the big five doesn't have Amazon.
Yeah. Well, right? Okay.
So
the obvious.
Even though they put it up on Amazon, Amazon has all the levers. So like for a fact, like if they can say to you, hey, do you want to read her last book? Do you want to read another one? And then when you wake up in the morning on my launch day, you could open it up your Kindle, and there on the front of the Kindle is Anne Garvin's book, right? So they don't have that. So, and the real hard thing for me is the hardest thing in all ways is how devoted I am to independent bookstores, right?
Yes.
But independent bookstores, they don't want me. And the truth of it is very many independent bookstores didn't know about me even when I was with the big five needing the independent bookstores.
Correct.
Because it was a discovery issue. So it's a hard thing to pit bookstores against the authors because of the distribution, right? And the other piece of it is big media. There's so few magazines. There's so few big media. And so if you don't hit the Reese list or the Oprah list or something, what's left? And the only people that get those every time are Jodi Picoult or Jennifer Weiner or some random pick. But the problem with that random pick then is that what about their next book? And that's where it gets really hard because there's so much noise that if Amazon wasn't sending me out all the time, say, hey, remember Anne? Hey, remember Anne? You would forget Anne.
Correct.
Like everybody would. And
well, it's no different from, I saw the book and I said, I've got to get that. And then life took over, right? Yeah. It's just, that's what happens. And so I recently heard that it used to be that you had to see something between 9 and 13 times. Now it's like 26, because our attention is just, it's being pulled everywhere. And those of us with attention issues to begin with are in a lot more trouble. I think, can we talk about self-publishing just a little bit? I know that's not your paradigm, but
so I talk about it all the time. Yeah.
Do you? Okay. Yeah. That's what I've done since 2004. It's probably what I'll continue to do. I've been very transparent and I've worked very hard to not say, oh, I have a problem with traditional publishing. Because I don't. I've never done it, first of all. And I have a lot of friends who have done it and have been quite happy. And I have a lot of friends who have done it and said never again. And I have a lot of friends who have done it and been happy and then done it and not been, the whole thing.
Yes, right.
I think it's very dependent upon who your editor is and what's in retrograde and all these things. But, it's like, there is more opportunity, I think, today. Well, I know there is, for truly committed self-published or hybrid published authors. And we're not talking about the people who are like, you can write a book in 5 minutes and sell. We're not talking about that. Okay. No. We're talking about people who are just as committed as their traditionally published counterparts. Where is there a leg up, I guess, with traditional publishing? Like, for what reason does that still feel like a really good fit for you?
That's such a good question. Here's the answer. I don't want to know. Okay, so I was a nurse, PhD, exercise physiology. I don't want to learn that thing. I'm 62.
You're 62?
I am. Yeah.
What products are you? My God.
I dye my hair. I think that makes a big difference.
This is fantastic. I feel so great about you. Just made my whole, I'm excited now. Okay. I'm excited.
Why should we date?
What's that?
Is it because we should date? Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel just so excited. I've been lamenting that I turned 50 last year and it wasn't awful, but it was kind of rough. Like, I would see other people post on their Facebook, it's my 50th, and I'd see it and go, my God, you're so old. And then I thought, oh, fuck. Like, hi. Yeah. And I'm still getting used to it. It's like having 5 kids. People say, how many kids do you have? And I say 5, and I still catch myself. Like,
yeah.
And so, okay, 60, I feel great about this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, some of it is just like, and plus I came to writing late. And so I had to teach.
How old were you when your first book, when the first one came out?
So 2010, do we have to do
math? Yeah. Okay. So, I'm not good at that without a calculator.
Years ago, so
God, like 48, 49.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Right? Yeah.
Oh, I love this. Okay.
So I had to learn how to write a book. And now if I have to learn how all of the levers and then figure out how to do a cover and then also run the tall poppies, like, I would rather die. I can't do that. Like, it's too much. And I sort of have shouted uncle on that,
Yes.
But I'm telling you, like, you should have Kay Bratt on your, Kay Bratt is, she is the author of many books, but also she is Friends in Fiction. Is it Friends in Fiction or is it, no, My Book Friends on Facebook. And I can introduce you to, she's fantastic. And she is doing a lot of different things, self-publishing some things, and then really has learned so much about, all of the stuff behind the scenes. And that's the thing that I admire most about really what you're talking about, those committed self-published people. Oh my God, the hustle. But I feel like I just can't hustle like that. Like, I built this program, I teach at MFA. I can't hustle and learn algorithms and Facebook ads and stuff. I know I should, but I just can't. Like, I'm too tired.
I feel the same way. Well, look, I feel the same way. And I love the writing and I don't mind the publishing, I think, because I'm a masochist, but the marketing is, I love talking. I love connecting with people and talking about books, not just mine, certainly, but all books and stories and just meeting people. And that's a great air quote marketing technique. But to have to just get out there is painful.
Yeah.
It feels quite painful.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a misnomer, speaking of Jodi Picoult, she, and I don't know her, and I think she's done very well and all of this, but she was quoted within the last, I believe, couple of weeks as saying that indie authors, whether self or hybrid published, are just taking the easy way out. They just don't want to do the work of trying to query an agent or whatever. And when I heard that the other day, I thought, my God, there is nothing easy. I don't think there's an easy way out in publishing, period. But certainly one of the greatest challenges for an indie author is the distribution and how did you phrase it? Getting the word out.
Yeah. And
you don't
the
have
demand, the distribution. Yeah.
There you go.
I mean, that's the thing that's so daunting to me. And then, then also, you either have to hire or be a cover designer. You have to do all the copy. Like, that is not for wimps. And
right.
It's not like, I sometimes think, like, I do wonder, like, if my publisher dumped me, what would I do? And I just don't want to think about it, because if I end up having to think like, well, you're going to have to learn something. And I'd be
I'll publish you.
Yeah, okay. But I'll come to you.
We got to find someone else to take care of the marketing, but I'll publish it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
With Zibby, I'm sure she'd probably get in there before I would. But, it is really challenging. And I think the questions of, okay, there are a lot of traditionally published authors who are they're using a large portion of their advance to hire publicists, to hire marketers, right? Because they don't get that from their traditional house. They know they're not going to, but the expectation is still there. I have a good friend who's traditionally published. And when I asked her, why not self-publish? She said what you said. She said, I know myself. And if it all falls on me to get all that done, it's never going to happen.
No, I'll get an ulcer. And because I'm also the girl that had like, oh, I have to do all that. Okay, I'll do all that because that's what I have to do. And then, it would take all the fun out of it for me, because I just would stress too much. And I have to say, like, in the beginning, just building the poppies and writing books and, family and the rest of it, I don't even know how I did that. So if I had to now pivot again and try to do my own sales and all the rest of it, I think I would die. I can't imagine it.
Well, it's just a slower.
Well,
yeah. And I think if you're going to do it yourself, which many people do for one reason or another, not the least reason is finances, right? If you can't, commit 10, 15, whatever is required. And doesn't have to be that much, but, is to have like a tall pop, to have a community where you are kind of launching each other.
Yes.
And you're speaking to your people about their books and they're speaking to their people about your books. And sometimes it's not a good fit, obviously, right? If you're talking to a thriller group about a rom-com, but that sort of connection piece, you can't replicate. Well, you can't replicate it.
No, you can't.
I don't want to phrase this the way it wants to come out, which is like, what's the advice you have? I hate that. But what do you say to first time, either aspiring authors or authors who have released one book and then they're kind of like, oh my God, can I do this again? How do you, what's something you've learned?
So if you're an aspiring author, and this is difficult, I think you have to find someone that really tells you the truth about, your writing, which I think because the more they tell the truth, the better you can get. Right. And I think probably I read this once and I wanted to reject it so bad, but I couldn't. And that was if somebody wrote the number one reason why people won't get published is impatience. And I thought, yeah, that's true, right? So
I literally have on my and I'm not trying to whatever here, but I'm just saying I have a reel somewhere on my Instagram that says the one thing that every successful author needs to have more of, including me, is patience.
It's patience.
Yeah.
Yep. And so I wanted to reject that because of course everybody's in a big hurry and I was too, but I do think that's probably the number one thing I would tell, aspiring out, get good advice and then, which is good, right? Good advice, but, and have patience. And then for like an author that's got one book, here's what I would say to them. I would say, keep going, because I do think that's, the number one thing is you got to keep going. But I also think it's very smart to say to yourself, like, what am I actually getting out of this? Do I want to continue it? And I felt that way about everything, right? So the reason that I write is that when I'm writing, I am in the closest state of flow I've ever been in. I'm enjoying it. I laugh. It's funny. I don't like other things related to it, but when I'm having a good time, like, man, I love it. So I love to actually write, but I have to laugh because Fran Lebowitz said that anybody who says they like to write, they must be pretty bad at it. And I get where she's coming from. Like, I get that. But like, if there are people out there that just was like, I just want to have one book in the bookstore, but now they're faced with, because we take our goals and we just, right. And so now they're like, I just want two, or I just want to sell more books. Or I want
to be closer to the front of the bookstore, or I want,
Yeah. And so I think you have to get really good about saying, I don't, my goal is always the same. I just want to keep writing. Number two is I want more readers, but if I don't get more readers, I don't get to keep writing. So those things are together. Right. Yeah. Unless I decide to do self-publishing, which we already decided is probably not
for you.
Right.
Well, and this is fascinating because one thing that I say to a lot of the authors that I'm working with who get stuck, because we all get stuck.
Yeah.
And, sometimes there's a feeling of like, I don't even know if I want to keep doing this. I don't even know. And I will just look at them and say, you don't have to. Mm-mm. And I remind myself of that as well. Like that is when you remember that you have a choice. I mean, it might be different if you're under contract with a publisher, but when, you have a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of whether or not you want to continue, or if you are under contract, you can choose not to do another one after that.
I was reading many years ago, I read this story about this older man who wanted to be the oldest man to climb Everest. And he had tried at least once before and didn't summit. And then he had been practicing and doing all the rucking, hiking all over the place, trying to get himself fit enough to do it. And so he went there and, it's several $1,000s, not a small thing. Plus you have to be incredibly fit. And he got to Hillary's Step, like right there at the top. And they said, there's a storm coming. We can summit, but the storm might come. And you need to know that if the storm comes, it's going to be game over for us. But this is your only chance. We have to do it now because we can't camp here. We got to go. And the guy said, well, I want to be able to see my grandson. So he didn't summit. And I'm like, to me, they should give him the goddamn thing because he should get Best Decision of the Year award.
There you go.
Yeah. And so sometimes it takes, and this is not an American way. It's not the American way. And nor is it, really heralded in any way, but it takes a lot of courage to give up. And some people probably, for whatever reason, mental health or otherwise, should give up. Now, I have some friends that are in that position right now. First book, really struggling. But I know those people, and those people need to keep going because they're never going to be happy unless they do. Right. And that doesn't mean they're going to do 3, 4, 5. But for now, I really do think they should keep going. But I think that some people will do it to the extent that they let their health go.
Right.
And that nothing is worth your health.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's the health. Yeah. And I taught stress management for years and sometimes I followed it and sometimes I don't. And when I don't, I pay for it.
Sure.
So I have to kind of step back and reassess. What I'm doing. Mm-hmm.
I think that's true in everything.
Yeah.
Or so many things, right?
You know what? I was in, just recently I was in Europe with my friend and I looked over and there was this window that said no wasted days. And I said, they should have another window that says, Anne, you should waste a day.
I was just going to say, oh my God, I couldn't live that way. No. I mean, it depends how you define a wasted day. Like some people would say, if you just lie on your couch all day with a book and your dog in your lap and, that's a wasted day. That's the best day. Like
I know. This was like a sports store. So of course
it was. Right.
Yeah. But I'm like a whole lot of people. Some people need that. Like some people need a little motivation, right?
Sure.
People like me, they need someone to go, it's fine.
Sit down.
Settle down. Yeah. And so, and I think there's probably a lot of writers like that are just, they are good girls too. And they're trying to do everything right. and they're running themselves ragged because what they see is the sales didn't go, and somehow or another they're believing you didn't do it right.
Correct.
And that is
everybody else has a different experience.
Yeah. And I want to assure people that, once that book is out in the world, there's not really that much you can do. You could do some, but we're not talking the difference between 92 and 20,000. We're talking about the difference between 92 and 1,000. Right? Like, we're not talking about that. The 20,000 reviews, that's not me. It is a little bit because people like the book and they keep reading it, of course.
Right.
But the first shifting of those letters are coming from
someone else
that's larger than me. Yeah.
Well, and I think unfortunately that actually kind of stymies some authors, right? Because they feel like, well, there's this huge wall in front of me that I cannot climb over, go around, or push through. Like, it is immovable. So therefore, what's the point? And because I'm, again, masochistic, I have a sign right up here that says everything is possible. Like, I'm the girl who's always trying to figure out, okay, if we can't go around it, over it, through it, under it, what can we do?
Yeah, me too. Me too. And I always say I'm the original workaround girl, right? Like, I never got through anything going through the front door. But I also think that, like, I have to tell myself, you don't have to rise to every occasion. And that's hard I think for people like us, right? It's hard. So the woman that Stephanie Burns, who is also an inspiring writer, who helps me run the Poppy. She's my COO. I've told her that every time I come up with a new idea, she's supposed to say to me, no new ideas. That's her job. Her job now is to say nothing new.
Right.
Because I think I can do it, I move towards it. And that, I don't have to do that. It's hard.
I do the same thing. I think it's a personality thing.
Yeah.
One more, I said one more, but I lied. I remember reading at the end of whichever one I'm currently in, that Tiffany Yates Martin is your editor. Is she your current editor?
She is my developmental editor. Yeah, she is. And she has been for the last 3 books. Melissa Valentine is my acquiring editor now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but Tiffany does the developmental on it before it gets to Lake Union?
So Lake Union, I send it to my editor, my acquisition editor. She reads it, brings Tiffany in on it.
Got you.
Yeah. And so Tiffany works through Amazon, and she and I have worked on 3 books together. And I must drive her crazy.
Brilliant.
She is.
I can't. Smart. Like, I think she is so, I have her book Intuitive Editing, and I cannot tell you to how many people I have recommended that book, because it's a masterclass times 75 in a book. Like, I just think, in fact, I just Instagram message, if she's listening, I just Instagram messaged you the other day, Tiffany Yates Martin. And I said, I know for a fact, I want you to dev edit the novel I'm working on. So I'm going to need you to let me know if you're open to that and what your schedule is.
Yeah,
so
I think she does do that. She does. And I think she works at the speed of light. I don't know how anyone works as fast as she does. And I think she must work with intuition, intuitive editing. She's just so speedy. I must drive her berserk.
Well, I doubt that. I don't see how you could drive anyone berserk, unless you and I both drive everyone berserk, which I assume is a possibility, but it's not one that I am going to choose to consider. I think she just is so clear on the formulaic. Like, we don't want to think that books are formulaic, but they are. The artist in us doesn't want to think about that. We want to be creative, but she knows. Yeah, she knows what these books need to keep people turning stories. She understands stories so well. And so I think maybe that's what lends itself to her ability to be so quick.
Yeah. Yeah. I find her amazing. Like, her focus must be incredible.
Yeah.
You know, and the other thing she's really good at that I really am not very good at is like, what do I want to say? She's so detail oriented. Like I'm detail oriented, of course, because I have to write all these details, but she'll be like, wait, what? And I'll be like, how did you see that? Of course, you're right. I need to fix that. But I just am always, she like pulls the needle out of the haystack.
Yes. That's such a great quality in an editor. I mean, it feels like it's not in line with the story, but it absolutely is. If the main character has a brother in chapter 1, but then in chapter 8, they have a sister.
Yeah.
We won't, as writers, we won't even remember, like, you know.
Mm-mm.
So, okay, I swear this is the last question. What are you reading now?
Oh, what am I reading?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, okay, I'll give you a little blurb. I'm reading The Memory of Lavender from Amy Runyon, and you can't get it yet because I'm blurbing it.
Oh, how fun. Okay.
I know. So I'm reading that. And then the book that I'm having my Masters of Fine Arts students read is City of Thieves, because it's, you know, he was the showrunner for Game of Thrones. And so he really gets story. And so I want my students to read it so they really understand. It's like 3-act play. It's beautifully done.
Somebody else just recommended that book to me, and I can't remember who it was. And this is why I ask, because I just want my TBR pile to be toppling, which it is. I don't know what to do. I need new shelves. I need all the things, because every time someone recommends a book, and I love it because it's never, so far, no one has ever recommended. I've only been doing this for a few episodes now. When I remember, I like write it down so I remember, but nobody is mentioning a book that's top of mind for everyone.
Right.
Which I love.
Yeah, I love that too. You know, I'll tell you what book I read just recently that I absolutely loved was, I think it's The House is on Fire. Oh. And it's the one where I think it's The House is on Fire. Anyway, it was written, and then she was supposed to go down someplace like Georgia to talk. And she was going to talk about some slavery in not a great way. And so they told her she couldn't come. And then it was a big hoo-ha about that. And she was like, I just wrote about what's true, that is factual and based. And so I read that book, and boy, is it a good book. It's just a really good book. I'm surprised it got any kind of pushback. It wasn't anything new in terms of slavery.
Well, we are in the year of let's cancel everything and everyone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and book banning.
That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Right? Uh-huh. Oh, I cannot thank you enough for your time.
You're welcome. It's such fun to talk to you. Let's keep in touch. I mean,
I would love that. I just think you're so fun.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, this is your friendly reminder to follow or subscribe, leave a quick review, and share it with someone you know has a great story or message, but isn't sure what to do next. Also, remember to check out publishaprofitablebook.com for book writing resources and tips, and to see all the ways we can work together to get your book out into the world. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk with you again soon.